Good morning and welcome into Bet the Edge on this Monday on the NBC Sports EDGE YouTube channel alongside Drew Dinsick. I'm Sara Perlman, and today is part 2 of our countdown to training camp series. We'll be joined by Eric Eager of Pro Football Focus, as well as our very own Kyle Dvorchak, discussing which teams to fade before camps begin. And with that, that also means some valuable insight on which teams are being slept on in the market. And of course, as always, we will have our Edge of the Day and so much more coming up here on Bet the Edge, powered by PointsBet. Drew, happy Monday. For those of us joining us on the video side, would recognize that you were in the most gorgeous place I have seen in a long time with the trees in the background. That was your weekend. What's going on?
Incredibly beautiful weekend up here in the Eastern Sierras in California, but bittersweet weekend as far as the results of the championships at Wimbledon. Obviously, our girl Ons Jabeur with a magical run to the final gets the first set, but then just could not find a winner from there on in the match. And congratulations to Elena Rybakina for winning her first ever slam. And I guess it's next year for us for Ons, but I really thought she had it. That was a tough one.
And, I'm grateful for you, though, for giving out Ons Jabeur a really good number weeks and weeks before the Wimbledon. I did end up hedging, but for those people who had Rybakina, she was 100-1 to win Wimbledon when those prices opened. So anyone holding a ticket, congratulations on a big number for Rybakina. But credit to you, Ons Jabeur making a run to the finals rather than, looking at the poor and sad side of it because we became such Ons fans. Listen, that was an incredible run. It really was. Yeah, and I know you took the over in the match as well, but an incredible run for Ons. And I look forward to betting her now for every grass tournament you want me to bet. I will bail you on.
Yeah. And then the men's side yesterday was about the most predictable tennis match in a long time. It's rare that they're that predictable, that you basically have it play out that way. Djokovic has kind of set up a very clear strategy that he has made transparent. He did it in the semifinals. He did it in the finals last year. He uses the first set to really kind of absorb whatever his opponent is bringing in terms of style of play and what his timing his service games, and then he turns up the pressure in sets 2, 3, and 4 and wins 3-1. And amazingly, it sounds like he's not going to be at the U.S. Open because of his vaccination status, which is unbelievable to me. But that opens up the door for one of these young up and coming players to win a U.S. Open, perhaps Medvedev to defend his title. So going to be fascinating to see how this U.S. swing works on its way up to the U.S. Open.
Yeah, the vaccination discussion maybe for another day, but I do like the idea that maybe this opens up room for value down the board, and we'll get into that obviously with you. But it was curious just thinking about Novak Djokovic, You talked about his tournament to lose, and yes, it was 4 straight Wimbledon titles for him. He was minus 125 pre-tournament, and I know that the book took a ton of money on him, ends up winning his 7th Wimbledon title. It was insane. Hey, just a reminder, if you don't have the NBC Sports Predictor app powered by PointsBet, go download it now. The contests are free and easy to play, and you have a shot to win thousands by predicting what will happen in Major League Baseball, on the PGA Tour, and NASCAR circuit. We also have a special contest on both Tuesday and Thursday called Battle of the Bets, where you can agree or disagree with our experts for a shot to collect some cash. When are you back on Battle of the Bets? Are you on Tuesday or Thursday?
I think later this week. I still haven't lost my crown, but because of the travel schedule, I haven't been able to join lately. So I think Wednesday or Thursday probably for me.
Okay, I look forward to tailing you on Battle of the Bets. The chance to win $2,500. All right, we're going to get into another part of our episodic series as we break down the NFL. And as we look forward to the season, we have Eric Eager, Pro Football Focus. And as I said, our very own Kyle Dvorchak joining us now. Guys, thanks so much for taking the time. Really what we want to do, and we're going to begin in the AFC, is break down teams we're fading, right? Maybe they're a little bit, the value sucked out of them in the market. They have a lot of hype surrounding them. And that's where I'm going to begin with the Miami Dolphins. And I'll start with you here, Eric. I look at the Miami Dolphins and their win total's 8.5. The over is juiced and a lot of money over at PointsBet. 88% of the win total handle has come in on the over. They're plus 425 to make the division. The Tyreek Hill signing obviously got a lot of people hyped. 2 is another discussion. Eric, take it away. What do you make of the Miami Dolphins?
Yeah, when I look at this team, it's sort of this classic example of, the end of the season, you have a certain record, right? 9-8. And, I think we're all positive about the direction of the franchise, 10-6 the year before. but you really have to take a closer look into how that 9-8 was constructed, because, a lot of people are going to look at that and say, oh, now this win total, we don't even need them to improve for this thing to go over. And I think you look at the actual composition of their wins, that, they had an opening day win against the New England Patriots where they were outplayed, but got some turnover luck. Then they had 7 consecutive losses. And then after that, it was, they got a nice, spot on a Thursday night against the, Baltimore Ravens, who had just played 5 quarters against the Vikings that previous Sunday, and then a bunch of quarterbacks who were not particularly good. So fundamentally, I think you have to ask, where were they last year? 6, maybe 6.5 wins, I believe is kind of maybe a decent estimate of where they were fundamentally. And then, okay, are they 2 or 3 wins improved? Does Tyreek Hill equal that? And I think most fans think that Tyreek Hill is worth full wins, but for the most part, I think bettors will tell you, and folks that do things like wins above replacement, he's more like half a win, right? So can he be worth that plus a little bit of a force multiplier on Tua? Can Tua improve? Because this team is going to have to improve, even in addition to the acquisitions they made, just to have the same record as last year. And I don't think the average bettor sort of thinks that way.
Yeah, I also think I like the Mike McDaniel hiring, right? I think it's a very good hiring in the ether, but the style of offense San Francisco played was sort of antithetical to what we know Tua does well, and Tua does it well in a way that is probably evidence of his limitations, but he's great on RPO and play action. And the San Francisco 49ers, they actually ran RPO at like half of the league average rate, and they ran play action at a slightly below average rate last year. So is he bringing a scheme that is good in theory to a team that cannot execute said scheme? I think so. And I'm concerned that he really tips his hand to, well, I know the Shanahan offense works. And we see that by him spending money on 3 running backs, one of whom he's already coached, and a fullback. Like, I think he's going to execute 49ers to a T. And I don't think Tua can do that as well as the average quarterback even.
It's all very fair points, and I don't mind kind of throwing a little bit of cold water on the Dolphins at this point, mostly because their schedule is somewhat fragile. There's a handful of pretty clear games that they ought to win that'll get them into that 6-7 win range. But then everything else, you basically need it all to break your way. You need them to win a bunch of coin flips to get you to 9, in my opinion. And realistically, the AFC East, they're gonna have to come up with wins against the Patriots realistically if they're gonna make the playoffs and hit that win total. So I don't mind being a little bit bearish on the chances of the Dolphins as we head into the season. A team that I'm surprised is on the fade list potentially, although this is maybe more about the way that the market is pricing this team, is the Kansas City Chiefs. Currently a relatively high total of 10.5, although that has not been a difficult milestone to reach in the Andy Reid, Pat Mahomes era. And I think, this maybe the bearishness speaks more to how competitive the AFC West is in general. I'll start with you, Kyle. Do you see any issues with the Chiefs in terms of just, maybe they don't have to go out there and give us their best every single week, all throughout the week? It's more important how they finish the season. And for those reasons, selling on them to start the season and finding a buy low in season make more sense.
Yeah, I think it's even more so they don't have to, they probably don't have to give us, Andy Reid doesn't give us his best every week. He gives us his best like week 15 on or whatever. But when you have Patrick Mahomes, you don't have to give us your best every season, right? You can say, right now is not our window. We're going to not spend hundreds of millions of dollars on Tyreek Hill. We're going to send him off and build for the future. And I think if you were looking at this year, that's probably a losing bet. You want Tyreek Hill as opposed to not having Tyreek Hill. You don't want to try and replace him in the aggregate like they do in Moneyball with Mecole Hardman and Juju Smith-Schuster. And I love Sky Moore, but this second, a day 2 pick, right? But I think they're planning for they signed Patrick Mahomes like a decade-long deal. They're planning for a 5+ year window where the rest of their division is planning for like the next 2 years. So I think they're not even like the weakest team in their division, but the gap between them and their division came so much closer this year, and that's perfectly reasonable. I don't think it's an indictment of the team. It's just their views on planning for a 5+ year window.
Yeah, last year was Andy Reid's first year going under a season win total as a head coach of the Kansas City Chiefs. That last year was 12.5. They missed with the loss of the Bengals in week 17. Kyle's right. Like when you look at scheme, sort of metrics, Andy Reid sort of gives his best when they play like Baltimore in week 3, Buffalo early in the season, and then it trails off as the season progresses. This year's going to be a little tricky. They have the hardest schedule in the NFL per our metrics. It's about a point harder per game than the average team on a neutral field. So that's going to be tough for them. However, and this is where I like your question, Drew. because, they're sort of getting into that Belichickian Patriots sort of mode of we can go 2-2. There was a 1 year, last year, the Patriots won the Super Bowl. They lost to Jacksonville and Detroit in September, and they end up winning the Super Bowl. Like, I think when you look at the way Kansas City finishes this year, they go at Broncos, at Texans, home to Seahawks, home to Broncos, and then at Raiders. That's probably the easiest stretch of football. If they can be 500 going into that, they're probably fine. And to Kyle's point, in the NFL, the last MVP to win the Super Bowl, last season-long MVP to win the Super Bowl, is Kurt Warner in 1999. It's never about being the number one power-rated team or the favorite going into January. It's about just being in there all the time and then letting sort of the combinatorics work out. And the fact that, when they won in 19, it was actually Baltimore's year to win the Super Bowl. And the 2 years they went in as the favorite, they didn't win the Super Bowl. So I think for them, they sort of understand that, and they built a roster accordingly.
So let me ask you this, Eric, before I move on to the next team. I am curious, right? We look at this Kansas City team, what they did to their defense now with Tyrann Mathieu gone. We'll see. And we talk about, kind of maybe not their year. Wide receivers gone, Tyreek Hill out. We'll see what MVS does. I'm curious, how would you attack this team as the season progresses? Is there a way or time that you look at Kansas City and you're like, okay, I'm done fading them. Maybe I'll get involved in the futures market?
Yeah, I wouldn't bet on them early in the season. I mean, they're already laying a full field goal in Arizona against a team that won 11 games last year. Then they have to lay a full field goal at home to a Chargers team that I think we're all high on. They have Buffalo, they have Tampa early. I would probably, I wouldn't necessarily bet against them, but I would lay off of them. But you saw last season, they were the worst defense in the NFL the first 6 or 7 weeks of the year. And then during the middle of the season, Dallas led the league in scoring, and they held Dallas to 9 points. They had a bunch of games where their defense was really a catalyst for them. And even in the AFC title game, I thought their defense played better than their offense, especially in the second half of that game. So I think as the season progresses, when you have, 4 rookies in the defensive backfield, the guy that you're trusting to be your premier pass rusher as a rookie as well, and George Karlaftis, I think it's going to be slow to go. But I think halfway through the season, if history says anything, Steve Spagnuolo gets that team to play well on the defensive side of the ball in the second half of the year. So things like unders, things like, games where they win 24-3, to Kyle's point that, Andy Reid doesn't pull out everything, but they kind of win a game handily. Them being favored and under was a pretty solid play in the second half of last year.
Oh, I remember those games well. And that's, I think they have kind of established a little bit of a blueprint we can read into in that regard. And I think realistically, someone else in the AFC West will probably race out to a lead in that division. We don't really know who it's going to be. It may be the Chargers, could be the Raiders for all we can tell you. But somebody could potentially put together winning football in September and October and have the a comfortable lead in the AFC West, at which point buying in on the Chiefs to win the West at a price like, say, 3-1 or 4-1 makes tons of sense to me. And then realistically, if it looks like they have to go on the road in the playoffs, they're still getting so much respect in the market game by game on the road. You're probably going to be looking at them at like pick 'em or under a field goal in every single one of their playoff games. So, getting involved at a futures price, if you can find anything to win the AFC in the, 8-1, 10-1 range, as we get into the kind of the meat towards the tail of the season, I think that would probably be your buy point. But, we're speculating a lot here, and, there's a lot of football to be played.
Yeah, and you talked about that last year. Same thing with the Chiefs, and it was a profitable way to get involved. Here's a team that I'm personally, and I'm going to talk about them for Edge of the Day. It's the Tennessee Titans that I want your opinion on. Kyle, I look at the Tennessee Titans, and I see Ryan Tannehill, who threw more interceptions last year than he did with his first 2 seasons combined with Tennessee. Derrick Henry, a phenomenal player. Can he stay healthy? There's some question marks around this team, and they're the second favorite to win their division. Their win total, I look at them, it seems high to me. Is this an overvalued team in the market? Will you fade the Tennessee Titans, or how will you attack them in the betting market as we get ready for the season?
Yeah, I think we might all agree on this. If it sounds like you're on the under, I would be on the under. This team is at its best when it can jam play action, have Ryan Tannehill just bombing stuff to AJ Brown, who's not with the team anymore. And they're trying to replace him with Robert Woods, and Treylon Burks, bless his heart, can't stay on the field in the middle of summer. So I think the best years of this team, and we've seen it in Tannehill's numbers, he joined the team and was maybe the most efficient quarterback in the league. And it comes down the next year, but still good. Then last year it comes down again. I think this team's best weeks, best seasons are probably behind them in the way they're formed right now.
Yeah, I think the hard part for an analytics guy like me is like what the value of Vrabel adds, because I think when you look at some of the decisions he makes, they punted the ball game away against the Ravens 2 years ago in the playoffs. Last season, Henry had like a plate in his foot and they run him 20 times in that game. You know, and I think it was hidden in the fact that Tannehill threw interceptions and Burrow was sacked 9 times. But like his usage was poor, you know, in big games. But for the most part, like that team played the most players in NFL history last year, and they ended up getting a 1 seed in an AFC that is pretty tough, right? They beat the heck out of the Chiefs. They beat the Bills. Like this team, like there are intangible pieces that you want to buy into, but there just aren't enough tangible pieces anymore. You know, on the defensive side of the ball, you have Landry, you have Simmons, you have Dupree are okay. Byard's a really good safety, but at the corner spot, there's a ton of question marks. Linebacker, you know, Zach Cunningham is terrible for this division because he just bites on play action worse than anybody in the league. And then on the offensive line, they just don't have, in my opinion, the horses to support Derrick Henry, because Derrick Henry used to be a running back, in my opinion, that overcame everything. And I think now he's regressed. He's still elite, but he's regressed to the point where he needs help. And I don't think that the Titans are going to be able to give him that kind of help, either from like, you know, run blocking, but also the threat of the pass, which I think is completely, you know, gone with Corey Davis and AJ Brown leaving over the last few years.
Okay, so let me ask for a price. Give me a market price for this then. The Titans go into this season with the mindset of, in order to do well and to win games like we did last couple of years, we need to get Derrick Henry the ball 25 times a game. Is that like, do you expect that is the way that they start the season, and how long can they stick with that before, you know, all of a sudden they find that they're not winning games?
I mean, I think that's their mindset for sure. I mean, that's why you get rid of AJ Brown. I mean, you know, it's the classic. They paid Tannehill in many ways because he's a great quarterback for this situation, right? He doesn't try to do too much. He's really good with his legs. He's actually pretty good throwing the ball to the most efficient parts of the field, where are the middle, which are opened up by Henry. But I mean, we've seen this before. This is a theorem about running backs. Like after they get a lot of carries, after they get hurt, they're just not the same guy. And like, you know, and so even if I think they're going to be defiant in this space, I think that's ever more the reason to sort of back what Sarah said at the beginning, which is this is just an under team. Even though the total is 2.5 wins underneath what they were last year, I still think it's a pretty solid play.
Yeah, I mean, you know how you can tell this team is going to go out and try and establish the run 25 plus times a game, maybe even the first half. Austin Hooper, a standout in minicamp. When Austin Hooper is your standout pass catcher in minicamp, you were coming out and Derrick Henry is getting on first, second, third, maybe fourth down.
Yeah, well, I think you guys know where I'm going for my edge of the day. I guess we all made it kind of obvious there. But on the flip side, obviously with teams that were fading, there has to be some teams that we're high on in the marketplace. And let's stay in the AFC. Kyle, teams that you like, who are they?
I like the Jags, and call me a glutton for punishment, because I get that they're the stinkiest franchise in the past 5 or so years. But I think this will reveal truly how awful Urban Meyer was, because Trevor Lawrence came in as probably the best quarterback prospect since Andrew Luck, and Urban Meyer ruined him. Maybe there's a chance, obviously there's a strong chance that Trevor Lawrence wasn't the guy he was billed to be, but I think given his incredible college resume and given how facially terrible Urban Meyer was, going from Urban Meyer, who maybe like, honest to God, might have been the worst coach I've seen in my lifetime, to Doug Peterson, I think that could really unlock this team. And they play in like easily the weakest division in the NFL, I think.
I like it.
Kyle makes a big the other thing is this team is over the salary cap by a significant amount next year. I mean, they're literally trying to win this particular season, which, you know, as a better and in the preseason, you have to take, you know, we'll talk about the Bears probably, but like you actually have to ask yourself, is this team trying? This team is trying. Whether they do anything with that is an important second question. For me in the AFC, I'm staying in the same division. I do like the Colts at price even. I think Matt Ryan's going to be wonderful. Frank Reich is great. The offensive line's good. Michael Pittman was terrific last year. Jonathan Taylor, he did increase his carries by 100 last year, but I think that, he'll at least have it for one more year. And then the defense, when you look at the metrics, that was one of the most disciplined and solid defenses in the NFL last year. And for a team where your bet is, please just don't screw it up, I think that they have all the ingredients.
Yeah, I think they have they made a good trade there. -110 to win the AFC South. Their win total is also 9.5. And I also like the Indianapolis Colts, and probably why we're all kind of off Tennessee in the division as well. We're going to break down the NFC, but first a reminder that weekends are better with MLB Sunday leadoff coverage presented by Uber Eats. Catch the Royals take on the Blue Jays in Toronto Sunday, July 17th at 11:30 a.m. Eastern, live on NBC and Peacock. To learn more, go to peacocktv.com/MLB MLB. And if you want a chance to win $25,000 on the game, download the NBC Sports Predictor app powered by PointsBet and enter Sunday's free Grand Slam Pick'em contest. So we broke down teams we're fading in the AFC. We now head to the NFC, and a team that I look at their win total sitting at 5.5, I'm not quite sure what to do with. It's the Seattle Seahawks, and the over is juiced to -130. They're 60-1 to win the conference if you want to go all that high, 14-1 to win their division. No Russell Wilson. This will be an interesting time to break down this team because you look at Geno Smith and Drew Lock, and I could probably make the argument that Geno Smith will get the start for the Seattle Seahawks. Really a new era for this football team. Kyle, what do you do with the Seattle Seahawks? Is it bet the futures market game by game? What stands out to you?
I feel like it may take 2 to 3 weeks for the market to realize how truly dreadful this team is. Because, we have this strong prior of them that it's always hard to separate. What was of the Patriots dynasty? What was Belichick versus what was Brady? We'll get this for every great team. And you look at the individual game level decisions Pete Carroll makes, and they're not indicative of a team that should have won a Super Bowl and been one of the winningest teams for a decade. To me, when you look at his in-game decisions, it looks like someone who held Russell Wilson back. And I think we'll see that when he finally is forced to cope with not just bad quarterback play, but possibly some of the worst quarterback play in the league. So even though this is one of the lowest over-unders we have, to me, it's probably the worst team in the NFL. And I don't think the coaching will be a coaching that can elevate that because they're just going to try and run on first and second down with an offensive line that could be the worst in the league. They're starting both rookie tackles, and the interior of their line is quite poorly graded as of Pro Football Focus. So I think they're both a mismatch in terms of talent for what they're trying to do and just untalented in general.
Yeah, no team in the NFL last year failed to get one or more receivers open on a play more than Seattle. And weirdly, Wilson was still able to find uncontested targets at a better than league average rate. So it's kind of one of those where I agree with Kyle. We're football analytics is finding ways of trying to understand how bad the Seahawks were at putting their players in position to succeed over the last 3-4 years. That was one that, I looked at last week. It's going to be dreadful. I also, there's a nice market. I don't know if it's on PointsBet yet, but I found it in a different book. Number of division wins for the Seahawks at 2, -115 to the under is another good one. This team is not competing with LA. This team is not competing with San Fran. I don't care what the history has been. And this team isn't even competing with Arizona. This is a bad team. And, we've doubted Carroll before. I remember being low on them in 2011 when Tavares Jackson was the quarterback and they still won 7 games. So I could be wrong here, but I just think Carroll has lost his fastball long ago, and we're all going to see it here.
Yeah, I don't know what the plan is, but I know it's not going to work. And I can tell you my fare for them is 4 wins. And realistically, as you looked at their schedule, they have 4 winnable home games, and then where the rest of them are coming from, that's anyone's guess. Staying in division and talking about another team where you're handing the keys to the quarterback and telling him, just don't screw this up. You have a really talented roster with the San Francisco 49ers, but an enormous question mark in terms of what you're going to get in terms of quality of play at the quarterback level. Eric, I'll start with you because this is a pretty important question. What degree of quality can you expect out of the quarterback in San Francisco? And, does the likelihood that you get kind of, young quarterback quality play from Trey Lance suggests that the Niners are going to have trouble making a 10.5 win total.
Yeah, one of the reasons I was looking at this was the Mike McDonald thing with the Dolphins and what they were going to try to do. Kyle Shanahan gives you so much as a quarterback. I talked about the Niners were one of those teams. They led the NFL last year in percentage of plays where at least one wide receiver got open. Yet Jimmy Garoppolo is bottom 3rd in the league in throwing to contested receivers. So he's like the Ron Burgundy of quarterbacks. He was just throwing what was called. And, and that was a lot of success. I mean, Jimmy G, his PFF grade wasn't great on 10 to 19 yard throws, but his NFL pass rating was 107.4. They scheme up open stuff for him. So for Lance, I think the bar is extremely low. And, the only thing that makes me worry, and we're in a marketplace here, is the fact that Kyle Shanahan didn't want him out there. That to me is the only piece of information that would make me less bullish on the Niners with Lance than with Garoppolo is Shanahan's decision making. But we've seen in the past, Shanahan, drafted Joe Williams over Raheem Mostert. He drafted Trey Sermon over Elijah Mitchell. The guy's personnel decisions aren't the best in the world. So I would say, just given all of the stuff that Lance can do, I'm bullish on them from an offensive standpoint. When you look at the data, like they just have defenses standing still. And I think if you have a quarterback that can move, a quarterback that has a lively arm, I think it's going to be a positive thing. And additionally, while the NFC West is tough, the NFC as a whole is kind of weak. So if anything, I'm on over here, but I think 10.5 is pretty fair.
Yeah, I like that. And I couldn't be, I think it's a fair line. I probably wouldn't take either side. But if I was forced to take, I would take over because I want to be betting on Trey Lance. Like you look at his college tape, what he was able to do in the few spots. He didn't really play much snaps, but in the 2 essentially starts he got, he's exciting. And I just want to be betting on him. And I think this may be even a team that if you think their distribution is wider, right? Because Trey Lance could come out and be an FCS quarterback who wasn't able to get on the field much in his first year. And that's not a good sign. Or he could be a product of the bad Kyle Shanahan, player personnel decision making, which has been like a consistent through line to the many good things Shanahan does. There's not been one of them. Benching Brandon Ayuk for 4 or 5 straight weeks in the beginning of the season when he's clearly the second best receiver on your team. I'm not bothered by that at all, and I'm still not tilting on jamming in my fantasy lines. It's fine. I think the distribution on this team is what I'm saying is quite wide. And if you want to bet them, maybe you're looking at the more longer futures, not just over 10.5, something like that.
Right. Yeah, they're 10.5 wins. I have not touched, and I actually haven't bet anything regarding the San Francisco 49ers. Still kind of waiting to see what shakes out here with the quarterback situation.
Well, real quick follow-up question then for Eric. So if the Niners make their 11 wins, Trey Lance finishes where in EPA per play among starters?
Oh, EPA per play, it's probably, especially if you count run,
Have
scrambles,
to
top
count.
3.
Okay.
I mean, Jimmy Garoppolo was finishing.
Wow.
He was consistently the best EPA play quarterback, and the Jimmy haters just couldn't handle it. And it's talking about separating these quarterbacks with their coaches. He still is the most difficult one to separate.
If you put running game in there, and if you put designed running game in there, quarterback runs are the most efficient play in football. So I think, they're a top 3 team in EPA per play. And to your point, Drew, because of all the stuff that's correlated with MVP, if they win 11 games, that may be the price to bet the 49ers, which would be Lance MVP more than anything. We saw it. Patrick Mahomes had just 1 start for the Kansas City Chiefs before he came on the scene and won MVP in his second year.
Okay, so for the math nerds at home who love this show, a wide distribution with extremes that have potential for huge payouts. That's where you want to attack a team like the Niners, an MVP market for Lance, where if he does give you what Mahomes gave you in year 2, and the Niners take on an otherwise very lukewarm NFC. And Niners are the 1 seed. He is absolutely going to be talked about for MVP. You can pretty much, you can write that in pen. That is a fun way to try to approach how you build out your futures book. If you have a narrow band like the Colts, bet them to win the division. If you have a wide band like the Niners, find a huge payday to make some money.
Yeah, I got to find the number on Trey Lance to win MVP now out of curiosity, because I do not have that available right now, but I'm sure it's pretty big over at PointsBet. Hey, I look at the NFC, Kyle, and I asked you teams that kind of are undervalued in the AFC. So now we look at the NFC. What stands out? A few teams that you think being slept on here.
Yeah, I'm glad you asked me first. I think Eric might have taken this one if I hadn't. I will be restoring the roar here, as Eric would call it. The Detroit Lions. They have been, to be fair, they have been already bet up to better than when they started. But you look, and their total is almost the exact same. The juice is slightly different, but it's about the same as Chicago. And I think they're a far superior team to Chicago. Chicago looks like they saw a few games of Justin Fields and were like, let's blow it up again. Sure, maybe he goes out and plays really well and you stick with him, but they already look like they're willing to move on to the next team. Whereas the Lions are building for being a year away. They're very close. They have maybe the best offensive line between having this incredible tackle duo of Taylor Decker and Penny Sewell, great interior line, and they've done nothing but build up the receiving core and even the running back room around, admittedly, Jared Goff. That's the one drawback on the offense. At least the defense is not particularly good, but that's why it's 6.5, right? So I think their offense has the potential to at least compete with any of the mid-tier offenses in the NFL, and 6.5 wins doesn't look like that reflects that.
Yeah, I think what I said previously about the Jacksonville Jaguars, I can say about the Lions is you and with the Bears, for example, it's not clear whether they're trying, right? So if you're going to bet they're over because of an easy schedule or whatever, you might get skunked there because they might just not be trying. This Detroit Lions team last year wasn't trying in the sense of who they put on the field, but once they were between the lines, they scored the most points in the NFL last year when when their win probability was 1% or less. So this team tries hard for Dan Campbell. They have tons of first-round picks on offense. Jared Goff, was fairly good last year after you strip away supporting issues. And then on defense, you want to buy variance, right? And the variance is there in the form of Jeff Okudah and Aiden Hutchinson, two premium position players who are top 5 picks, who, in the case of Okudah, is coming back from injury, but is undervalued there. But this is the prototype for every team I'm going to like in the NFC, right? The Detroit Lions have, I believe, the second easiest schedule after you look at it. The Washington Commanders at 7.5, they have the 4th easiest schedule. The Giants, I don't know if I'm willing to take that big of a leap of faith, but they have the easiest schedule in the NFL, over a point easier on average than the average team on a neutral field. If you look at the NFC, I mean, basically one of these bad teams has to beat out teams that are notorious chokers like the Minnesota Vikings, the New Orleans Saints, so on and so forth. And I just think that the path is relatively simple there. This isn't the AFC. There's going to be a team in the NFC playoffs who we're all surprised about. And Detroit, Washington, New York Giants, those are all teams that I think have at least a puncher's chance.
You can look at Dan Campbell for Coach of the Year. I know Drew's talked about that and got me an Aiden Hutchinson. Even there's so many different ways to attack this team, and you guys are all kind of on the same page. And I know that I've been sold on the Detroit Lions because Drew talked about them weeks ago on our show. Seems like we're on agreement there, Drew.
Yeah, I know. I mean, really, the only thing we have to worry about now is sort of the sharp consensus becoming getting mushed by all.
This
has happened. This has happened in the past with like the Cardinals, the Browns. We're like, just keep betting them up. There's no price.
Yeah.
I just thought the only question was whether they were going to wear Honolulu blue or road white for the 4-5 game in January.
I love it. No, the schedule makers set them up to have kind of the premier Thanksgiving game this year. We get the Bills Lions. The Lions are going to be coming off a win against the Packers because the schedule makers absolutely nuked the Packers in the middle of that schedule. They are putting them right through the absolute worst of it. Mm-hmm. And then you push right into a big win against the Packers into the Thanksgiving game against the Bills. There'll be a lot of buzz about the Lions this year.
That's the only Detroit game that isn't a Sunday 1:00 Eastern game. Every other game is Sunday at
12:30. Yeah.
Well, in 2 months from now, we will be talking about the regular season and a ton of games then. But in the meantime, as we get ready for the NFL season, Kyle, I'll start with you here again. What are you working on? What should we look out for?
Yeah, we've got our team-by-team previews coming out. Not only me, but the entire fantasy team. But we also, at the end of everyone, have our picks on the win total. So if you're here for the betting stuff, we've got that there too. And the same with Draft Guide. We've got fantasy content there, but I even have like player props written up in our Draft Guide. So check that out on the site.
Okay, amazing. Eric over at Pro Football Focus.
Well, I do the PFF forecast twice a week, Wednesdays and Sundays. But this week we are unveiling our college football preview, which has simulated win totals for all 131 teams now that James Madison is in the FBS. So look out for that. I know some of those markets have been available for a while, but they're softer than the NFL markets, which is fun.
Yeah, absolutely. Eric's on Twitter, by the way, at PFF_Eric, and he mentioned the PFF Forecast podcast with him and George Huri. That's an amazing listen. And Kyle on Twitter at Kyle Tweets here. Awesome content with NBC Sports Edge. Also a big part of a good football show, and you could find that wherever you listen to your podcast. Both Eric and Kyle, thank you so much. Have an amazing rest of your day.
Have a good one.
A lot of NFL talk gets me excited, and that's where I'll be going with my edge of the day, as I said, on the Tennessee Titans. But I will begin with you. It is your pick of the day, edge of the day, Drew. What is on your card?
Yeah, so sometimes you suffer a loss like on Strabor in the final of Wimbledon, and you want to quit betting tennis, but not me. We get right back on the horse. We're going to Newport. The fifth slam is what we call it. The Newport Hall of Fame tennis. It's on grass. This is the last grass tournament of the season. Newport, Rhode Island. If you haven't been there, absolutely beautiful. A lot of fun spirited American players, and the Americans honestly played pretty well on grass throughout this little swing here, including our own Stevie Johnson. Huge Stevie Johnson guy. He's made me a lot of money over the years, consistently underpriced by the market, and he is taking on Stefan Kozlov, who is just in absolute shambles right now in terms of form. Kozlov lost 2 matches in a row at Wimbledon, and you would say, how is that possible? You can't lose 2 in a row at the same tournament. Well, he lost in qualifying, but got the lucky loser spot and then lost in the round 1. And then if you go back 1 tournament prior, he played Stevie Johnson in qualifying for London, and Stevie Johnson beat him 6-0, 6-0. So in general, Kozlov is having an absolute complete loss of form going up against Stevie Johnson, who made round 3 of Wimbledon, and in general plays well on grass. And oh, by the way, former champion at the Hall of Fame tennis tournament in Newport. So I think realistic to expect Stevie Johnson to cruise to a victory today. I have laid the 3.5 games with him. You can still get that at +100, which seems like a very, very, very favorable price to me.
Are you getting involved in the under for games as well, or no?
I like the under, but the price isn't quite as good.
Yeah,
22.5 is too high, but I think Stevie Johnson comes through cleanly, 6-4, 6-3, something like that.
All right, love it. Stevie Johnson -3.5 in the games. Okay, I will go to the NFL for my edge of the day. We talked about the Tennessee Titans, and this is probably my last and final win total that I'll be betting before the season. And I'm taking the Titans under 9.5. I was excited to hear Kyle, Eric, and it seems like you as well, on the same page as me. No AJ Brown. That's going to be missed in the playing attack, in the passing attack rather, big time. Derrick Henry, the discussion with him. How much can you utilize him? We know he only played 8 games last season due to injury. And also, I think 9.5 is one or maybe more, just too many wins. You look at their 4 divisional games against the Texans and Jaguars, you can give them all wins. But let's look at weeks 9 through 13. This is what stood out to me. This is tough. How do they get to double-digit wins? Because they're going to take on the Kansas City Chiefs in Kansas City, the Broncos. They then go to Green Bay to take on the Packers, Cincinnati at home, the Eagles, and Philly. If they win 3 or less of those games, which I pick in a loaded conference, there's no shot they're getting to 9.5. So with Tannehill struggling, more picks last year, I mentioned, than in the previous combined 2 years with the Tennessee Titans, could be Malik Willis show, and that gives me a little bit of worry. So I'll take the under 9.5 for the Tennessee Titans in the win total market.
I love it. I agree with you on this one. I think there's a lot of teams that are going to be looking forward to getting exacting some revenge on the Titans for the way that they played last year. And in general, their schedule looks absolutely brutal. A lot of good teams. No, you can't count on easy wins against the Jaguars anymore. You're definitely going to have your hands full with the Colts. And that's
still me probably splitting the Colts, 1-1 with the Colts, and seeing how that plays out.
Yeah. I mean, I'm just not a Vrabel guy. I'm not a Derrick Henry guy. I think Tannehill coming back to earth in that playoff game spells trouble for them for the medium and short-term future.
Some lopsided action in terms of the bet count and handle, rather not lopsided. It's all on the under. 62% of the bet count, heavy action, 93% of the handle coming in on under 9.5 wins. So we'll see if this even gets bet down to 9 over at PointsBet. It is juiced to the under for Tennessee. That's all we have here today on Bet the Edge, and we look forward to next week again, finishing the last and final week before training camp begin. So for now, for Drew Dinsick, I am Sara Perlman. Thank you for being here on Bet the Edge, powered by PointsBet. As always, we wish you nothing but the best of luck with all your bets, and have an amazing rest of your day. We'll talk to you guys soon.